My name is Nemanja, and today we are discussing how to connect two different databases to Spring Boot application. All of us have worked with a situation where we have only one database. But what happens when we need to connect more than one, let's say 2 or 3 databases? Is it even possible? Yes, it is, and we will see how to accomplish this. What could be the possible reason why we need to do this? So let's imagine we have some old legacy data in MySQL database, and our new data is Postgres database. And let's say we need simultaneously to have access to both of these databases in order to retrieve data from old system and to have access to the new one. That's one use case. Other use case is that we just have two separate data sources. Let's say one data source is in one Postgres database and other data is in another Postgres database, and we just need to retrieve both of those data. So let's deep dive into code, see how we can accomplish this, what we need to configure in order to use two different databases, and what needs to be set it up. Let's go. So when we go to the code, I have created one project that connects to two different databases. The primary one is MySQL database and the second one is Postgres database. In order to establish connection to two different databases, it requires two different configurations. So the first one is defined in primary data source config. This class needs to be annotated with @configuration and also with @enable JPA repository. We need to give the base package for it. As you can see, the primary entities repositories I have marked with a primary prefix. And also I need to specify values, URL, username, password, and other connection important things for the database, and that is done in application.properties file. I have defined the first data source for MySQL, where I have defined URL, and I needed to add prefix primary to distinguish this URL from the URL to the secondary database. And also I added the other things for the secondary database. As you can notice, all parameters have secondary prefix except this one, because it's not used in the primary database, and also the same is for primary database. So once I retrieve the values for properties here, I define beans that will create necessary data source properties, data source, also local entity manager factory bean, where I will pass the values from the properties. As you can notice, all of these beans are annotated with @primary annotation. The reason for that is that Spring Boot tries to auto-wire data source, entity manager factory, or transaction manager bean by type. But since we have defined two different configurations for the primary database and also for the secondary database, the auto-wire does not know, the Spring Boot does not know which configuration to use. But when we specify or add annotation @primary, then we say, okay, this is the primary database, and by default use configuration of this database. And we define all the necessary things to it. Also, persistence unit, we pass some name to it. It's not relevant to our use, but it needs to differ from a secondary database. So in the secondary, I have used secondary PO. Let's go to the entities class and repositories. So for the primary data source, I have created student entity with the ID and name, nothing too much. And also I have defined student repository, which extends JPA repository. Nothing too fancy. The secondary data source reflects the car entity, also ID, make, model, nothing fancy, and also car repository, which extends the JPA repository. Okay, and that's basically it. This is the main class that I have defined. We can close all of these. I have added some additional configuration to application.properties, and also I have defined car controller, which retrieves data from the database, and also student controller, which retrieves data from the student class. So let's start application, and let's start Postman and try if we can establish and retrieve data from a database. Application has been started, so as Postman. So let's try to retrieve all the students that we have. And as you can see, we currently have only one student. So let's create one additional student. So let's say student number 2, create successfully. And immediately, as you can see, Hibernate prints us the query that he has executed. So he has inserted one student into a student database. And let's retrieve all students again. Now we have 2 students. Also, let's create, let's get cars. How many cars do we have? We currently have 2 cars. So let's add one more car. Now we will add BMW. Okay, and let's get cars. And now we have 5 cars. So let's validate that as well in our actual databases. So I'm using dbweaver as a database client, and this is the Postgres database secondary TP. And when we go into car database and data, you will see, yeah, there is 3 entries, BMWs, all of them. And when we go to MySQL, go to the primary database to student, you will see when we switch to data that there are 2 student entries in our database. So our experiment has worked. We have managed to establish connection to 2 different databases in Spring Boot application. One of those databases is MySQL database, and the second one is Postgres database. So 2 completely different databases with different types. Let's go once more through all the configuration that I have done. So I have defined primary data source config, where I have defined connection to the first database with adding at configuration annotation at enable JPA repositories, point to base package where is my repository, connected to dialect and DDL with primary suffix, created bean for data source properties. All the beans in primary data source are annotated with @primary annotation, meaning that Spring Boot will auto-wire these beans first instead of the secondary database. Also, the data source for the primary database, entity manager factory, and also transaction manager for the managing transactions. Same thing I have done for secondary database, just changed a couple of words to secondary. Also here secondary prefix, as you can see, the configuration properties is spring.datasource.secondary. There is no @primary annotation because this is secondary database. And also I have changed this secondary PO as well, and also added changed secondary here. That's regarding configuration. All the things that we need to do is to define the repository, which extends the JPA repository, to define the entity on which that repository will extract data, and the same for the primary database. And then all we need to do is to use those repositories in our controller or services. In my particular case, I have skipped the service layer because this is just a showcase. We have seen how to establish two different connections to two different databases in Spring Boot application. It's not too complicated, but it's not so trivial. With just a couple of add annotations and adding extra config for the secondary database, we can tackle that. Have you ever come into a situation where you needed connection to two different databases? What are your thoughts about these configurations? Are they too complicated or they are just trivial? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below and don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you would like to see more videos like this from the topic of Java, Spring Boot and software development in general. See you in the next video.